Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for being here today for our Speaking Experiential Language of Caregivers Learning Cafe. Before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone, which of these areas, time management, language, or long-term collaboration, is the biggest challenge for you right now when interacting with families? Feel free to put it in the chat. Time management. Okay. Time management, time management. Okay. Seems like we're having a theme, which is perfectly yes. Okay. So you keep putting it in the chat if you wish. Thank you, everyone, for your responses. Today will be all about learning more about communication strategies to break down those barriers. In today's session, you will have opportunities to interact with our speaker, Ken Kessel, throughout the presentation, whether messaging in the chat or you can speak with him directly and come off mic. So our speaker today is Ken Kessel, LCSW, who has been practicing since 1983. He has a specialty in infant mental health and has done extensive work as a mental health consultant in federal Head Start and other preschool settings. He also has worked in inpatient and outpatient mental health, medical social work, substance abuse, and developmental disabilities, and has consulted and presented in the US and Kenya. He has taught at the graduate level, both in the classroom and as a field instructor. Without further ado, Ken, the floor is yours.
Uh, Thank you, Nyla. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, ECLC, and welcome everybody. Um, I was struck when I was introducing me. It says I've been practicing since 1983. So I guess that means one of these days I'll get it right. But until then, I should keep practicing. Naya, if I could ask you to keep your face on screen, if possible, of course, then I feel like I'm talking to somebody. Thank you very much. Uh, a little bit about how I approach my work. Um, One way that I describe it is that I return things to the source, by which I mean this. Uh, as a species, as humans, we're wired to be relational. We're wired to make sense to other people. We're wired to make sense of other people. So that belongs to each one of us individually. It's not something that somebody gives you, although it is something that the way in which we grow up, our culture and our environment and how we learn to relate affect how smoothly that flows. So in a way, it's something that's fairly subject to inhibition uh, or distortion. And my experience has been that when I form connections that live in the middle of that where that's active for both of us, we each come away with an enriched sense of how to make sense of and how to make sense to. And I see that Kelly has your hand raised. My preference for this is that people show up on the video and that we talk with each other rather than typing things. So, Kelly, if you'd like to unmute and if you're comfortable showing yourself on the video, the zip line is really interesting. I did that once. Uh, so
Thank
what's your
you.
question, please?
Actually, I don't have a question. I hit the button on accident. Thank you.
Ah, okay. Well, welcome to the seminar. Uh, it's interesting to me that the first thing that came to people's minds about what they'd like guidance for is time management. And I don't want to be presumptive and say, I know what you mean by time management, or what is it about time, or the flow of time, or the active manage that presents challenges. So if one or two people could just let Naya or Kayla know that you'd like to speak, if you could say maybe a sentence or three or four words about what it is about time management that's challenging or complicated, or frustrating or makes your hair fall out. That would help me in guiding me how to focus. So anybody can feel free to chime in, but one of the takeaways for me is that we're often attracted to phrases, but we're not quite sure what we mean by them, and we're hoping somebody else will tell us. Uh, ah, for me, it is balance. Ah, here we go. We've got some chat things. Balance being pulled in many different directions, being pulled in many directions during the day. Ah, okay. Uh, let's get some sense of the audience. We have a potential audience of teachers, teachers' assistants, people who are caretakers in some form or another, daycare providers, occupational and physical therapists, social workers, psychologists, administrators. Can you just kind of quickly type in what your work role is?
Can you hear me? My name's Wendy Cooper.
I do hear you.
Oh, okay. I was invited to speak just real quick. I was the one that said for me it's balance. I feel as though I'm pulled in many different directions. So I
Right, a lot
am
of people said that.
yeah, yeah, I'm sorry. So I am the director of professional development, but under that title, I'm overseeing a few people with different grants. But we I work in a CCRC, so we tend to wear
Could you
many.
let everybody know what CCRC
Oh,
is?
sorry. Yes, a child care resource and referral agency. So
Hmm.
we wear many different hats. So that it's one of those things where we
So let me ask you, as long as you're here, what what do you find flows well for you in the midst of things that probably come through your door like a hurricane?
yeah, I tend to be someone people come to I'm a good sounding board. So I
Hmm.
get a lot of that throughout the day, and or I'm a very organized person, but a lot of things come across my plate that aren't expected, and I have my brain dump list that I use, and I don't always get to the things that I'd had planned, where you feel like you've, taken 3 steps forward and 2 steps back throughout the day. So it's
Hmm.
just one of those. It's finding that balance that works well.
And you wouldn't have remained in your position if you hadn't found a balance that worked for you.
Yeah,
So part of why I'm here is that people share their wisdom. So
yeah.
what seems to work for you?
Yeah. So at the start of my day, I do make sure that I prioritize things. So I do have it's a tablet, but it's called a desktop, and it kind of helps me organize everything
Hmm.
that I absolutely need to get done. And then I make sure that if I do need to get those things done, that I'm blocking time on my digital calendar so other people can see that as well. Sometimes it's hard to hold that space, but I guess the balance in that is trying to hold firm to those things that I've set aside, that time that I've set aside. Um, and it's a case by case kind of thing. So
Hmm. May I share some reflections about that?
sure.
You've hit upon some issues that are actually central issues in child development,
Hmm.
and they ripple forward into our lives just anyway, whether you're, whatever field you're in. If you have some administrative responsibility for a child development setting, this is just as crucial for you as it is for people, for parents, which
Hmm.
is children do better when life is meaningful for them. And one of the things that helps life be meaningful for children and families is having meaningful routines,
Yeah.
because meaningful routines are bolted firmly to pre-verbal skills of sequencing and anticipating.
Hmm.
Right now, next, later. Uh, and that starts very early, in many, many, many ways. Uh, if the child is in the crib and they cry and mommy or daddy comes and says, it's okay, mommy's coming, and then they pick up the child and they figure out what's going on that they need, and then they soothe them. Eventually, hearing the words, mommy's coming, starts the soothing process, right? So you're recognizing a cue that moves forward toward the resolution of a need. And putting the world in order is a developmental talent, right? It's like it happens before you talk. In a way, you're describing something that does that in a larger setting. You set up your organizer at the beginning of the day, and then you've got a flow. If you're running a daycare center, if you're running an after-school program, if you're running a classroom, the same kind of thing is very vital, right? We start out by saying hello, hanging up our coats, uh, playing with some toys, sitting in a circle, singing a song, eating some food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That when children and people in general know what's coming next, they can orient themselves toward it, and it helps the world flow in a more meaningful way. So that's one aspect of it. And the second aspect of it is fluidity. Uh, you may have decided that you're going to do A, B, C, D, and then when A is started, E comes along, and you have to do something. Uh, I'm guessing that most of us have some constitutional capacity to say, I'm going to put this on hold for a little while I attend to this. And uh, I'll I'll either finish it now and get back to what I was doing, I'll delegate it to somebody else, I'll fold it into the flow of the environment, or I'll say I can't deal with it now, I'll have to do with it later. Those are four kinds of potential choices you might make. Uh, and ideally, you're not making those choices in a vacuum, but you have colleagues to rely on. What I'm pointing toward is that one aspect of what there's different perspectives on time management, and I want to kind of leave it at that and move on to something else. There's time management in terms of other people expect me to accomplish outcomes in a given time period, and those are externally thrust upon us. And that creates its own set of demands and complications. There's also the kind of time management where this is my environment and this is how I manage my workload. And those are internally mediated time management things. There's a dance between the two of them because we're answerable to a lot of parties. I'm guessing, Wendy, and come back online and tell me if I'm entirely wrong, that one of the things that helps you with this flow is that you have some colleagues who you can rely on, and you have enough time to talk with each other, even if it's in the midst of things or during lunch or during the end of the day, where you get to process these things and you start to know what you can count on people for and what you'd like to count on people for, what they can count on you for, what they'd like to count on you for, and what you share with each other. Those relational things, I think, are maybe an underemphasized and underappreciated element of time management because time doesn't just exist as something that's floating out there that physicists and mathematicians talk about. Time is something in which we live in the flow of our circumstances, our activities, and our relationships. And the stronger the relationships are, the more resilient we can be about engaging unexpected things. And the more resilient we are about engaging unexpected things, the more reliable an environment we have because it's got trustworthy people in there who other people look to as uh, as reliable anchors when things that are unexpected happen. So I'm pointing toward the importance of having reliable professional relationships, reliable collegial relationships, because if it's only in one person's hand, that's kind of an unfair ask. It overburdens you. And in closing on this, I just want to say that I'm very aware that the environments in which we work tend not to have enough resources, not to have enough materials, not to have enough staff, and to have too much to do and not enough time to do it. So in those environments, everybody kind of focuses on a core set of activities that makes the day meaningful and kind of tries to adjust to the things that appear as we try to go about our core activities. Wendy, I just want to ask you, is that a reasonable response to what you were asking?
Absolutely. And I wholeheartedly agree upon the relationships being core um, a core piece of that, because without those, I would feel um, more frazzled, I guess, is what I would say. But I'm very blessed to have those relationships at work and the support. Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks for shouting out to your colleagues.
Yeah,
And I'm hoping that other people here also have colleagues that they can shout out to and rely on. Um, I want to tell you a story about my grandson that has something to do with communication with parents, and in some ways something to do with time management, I hope. We were driving to go to Crystal Grotto's Cavern in northwestern Maryland. If you ever get a chance, please go see it. It's the largest crystal cave on the continent. Uh, and it's about a 50-minute walk through. It's great. So Grandpa gets to ask life-related questions because I've been doing that to him ever since he was born. So I get to say things. So it's like, Simon, how's school? Well, what are you liking? Rah, 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 rah. Oh, okay. We find some things that he's doing better with, and we find some things that he likes. And I say to him, has anybody ever told you why you're in school? "Eh." Well, uh, do you find what you're doing interesting? Like if you didn't have to study it, would you? I said, okay. Some students like studying. So it doesn't matter what you give them, they'll study it because studying is fun for them. But most kids, they have other things that interesting them, and they don't see the value of what they're being told they have to study because it doesn't really have any value in their lives outside of school. Maybe when you're 20 or 30 or 40, then you'll understand why math or why grammar or why biology. But the why is missing. So um, let me tell you Grandpa's view of why you're in school. You're in school to learn how to look at something, make sense of it, and tell somebody else what sense you made of it. And everything you're being taught has that as the why, because you need to be making sense of something. And all the things that you're looking at can be interesting if you look at it that way. Did your teachers ever tell you? No. Oh, well, probably because nobody ever told them. So I'm telling them. He said, oh, can I tell my friends? I said, sure. He said, oh, well, can I tell my teachers? I say, yeah, you can tell your teachers. So if you have a question about why, you ask Grandpa. If you know why, then maybe you'll figure out how to do it. And then you can apply that to what you're studying. But usually people approach education about you have to learn something, that's the what. And then the way to learn it is the how. And they just emphasize to how to get the what. And I'm saying if you know the why, you'll find the how. And if you find the how, you can apply that to the what. And your parents are scientists, so they understand how and what very well. And Grandpa knows why, and I know a little bit about how. If you have a how or what question, ask your mom and dad. And if you have a why question, ask me. I mention it because I think it's applicable to conversations that we want to have with parents. And in a way, it's tangentially related to how we manage time because it's not like we have an hour to talk with each parent whenever they feel like it. So we have to have some sense of why we're communicating to a parent, how to communicate, what we want to communicate, and the overall context of how communication happens. So let me just ask a couple of people, uh, why would we ever want to talk with a parent about anything? I don't mean this, I mean it provocatively in a good sense. Again, Uh, I'm in the midst of people who have thought about things I haven't, so they're likely to have concerns I don't, and they're likely to ask questions I haven't. And the same is true for all of us. So I really am curious, what is on your mind about why to talk to a parent? Developmental delays, okay. So let's rest on that because we could go on 50 subjects. But who said that? Cheryl, can I ask you to come either on screen or at least on audio? Okay, hi, good to meet you. Uh, so it says you're unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything. So if that audio isn't working, could you maybe type and maybe have a couple of people type, what is it you would like to communicate? Oh, the microphone function is disabled. Oh, sorry. Okay. Uh, I'd just be curious from anybody then, what would your reason for talking to a parent about developmental delays be? Ah, Vidya.
Oh my God, I was just testing the microphone because I think we just got microphone capacity. Um,
Okay, well, I'm going to presume that you've had some experience with this, and if I'm right, could you make something up that might be interesting
yes,
for
of
us to talk
course,
about?
of course. So there are a couple of things about developmental delays that come to mind when I'm discussing a child with their parent. One is I'm really curious about how the child operates at home. So, in a
Mm.
one on one or in a family setting, how is the child doing? What is the child doing? What is the child not doing? And then I'm somewhat eager to talk about how the child functions in a group setting, a group of their peers. So, again, what is the child doing, not doing, and whether or not we should compare notes and start to strengthen some of the things that the child is doing, and maybe start to consider some of the things the child is not doing as something we may want to look into further.
Ah, so if I can keep you here for a second, is it fair to say that the why of this is because you're looking to form a partnership so that you can relate together meaningfully for the child and help to create a world that's meaningful for the child where they make good sense of the world and the world makes good sense of them?
Very well said.
Good. I've been practicing that since
Yeah, that was really good.
1983. So um, that's critical for any child. And if we, for a moment, suspend what we're observing as developmental delays, having a meaningful world for the child to live in where they make sense of the world and the world makes sense of them is one useful way of describing a supportive environment for a child, and one way of describing the collaboration we want to have with families. So, in fact, if you think about, again, child development in the early years, one thing they're learning from everybody around them is what is a human being and how do we relate to other members of our species? Uh, Maybe if their brains could talk, that's precisely how they'd say it, but I doubt it. But we're modeling human life all the time. Uh, and so in a way, it gives us the opportunity to consider how to be intentional about that, including how to be intentional about what we do casually. Meaning, if we need a break, what's a good way for a human being to have a break and still have a meaningful environment for the child who also has to discover how do I navigate on my own? So if the why has to do with developing a mutual view of the child, that's a very good why, because if that's what you want, that will happen. Uh, if I say joint attention, I'm hoping most people know what that means. But just to give it a quick overview, uh, if you look at two circles and they kind of intersect, right, that's called a Venn diagram, and the part in the middle is where they come together. So joint attention is something that also develops pre-verbally, and it's when two people are sharing the same mind space and looking at something together and being curious and engaged about it. And that could be as simple as face games you play with a 5-month-old, right? That's you've got joint attention about what you can do with your presence to each other. And really, play between children is an exercise in joint attention. And to the degree that it works well, teaching also rests fundamentally on joint attention. So when we're having a conversation with parents, one way to describe it is we're expanding the world of joint attention between us about the child. And if we're forming a partnership so we're on the same page, and what we want to do is form a partnership and get on the same page, that will help guide you about what it is you want to learn and what it is you want to talk about and how you want to talk about it. If you know that the why is to form as much of a partnership as possible, and maybe I only have 5 minutes, so what do I want to talk about? I wanted to share something my colleague Tiffany said once when we were working together with a family that everybody found very complicated except her. Uh, she found them complicated too, but she knew how to roll with it. Uh, they had two children in our Head Start in the Bronx, and in the classroom, they were kind of okay. You could tell that something was working well about the parenting because they didn't present much of a complication in class. Other than that, their attendance was extremely sporadic. They would come with clothes that weren't in great condition. Sometimes they had lice, uh, those kinds of things. And because of those kinds of things, Child Protective Services was involved. And because Child Protective Services was involved, two or three components were involved, plus other agencies all had their fingers in the pot. So when the site came to me as the mental health consultant about what to do, my sense was don't get involved in the sense of don't be another person in the family's life who's trying to stir things up. Consult with the people who they're already connected with and see how they can make sense of this together. There was a lot of tug of war back and forth about other people's views about what the family needed. And unsurprisingly, the family wasn't profoundly included about what they needed. But Tiffany was very sympathetic to them, and she wanted to know about their life, their needs, what a family advocate might do for them. And in the end, the family on their own decided that they had a very well-anchored uncle in upstate New York. And it might be good for the kids to go live with Uncle so-and-so because he could provide an environment that wasn't challenged or compromised in the way that hers was. And maybe they could figure out something once they settled in. And this was something the mother offered on her own. Nobody said, do this. She came up with it all by herself. And Tiffany was telling me how it unfolded. I said, Tiffany, there were maybe half a dozen or 10 people who were involved with the family, and many of them had all kinds of training that you don't and degrees that you don't. Oh, what did you do that you're the one who the family trusted? She said, oh, I spoke to them as if I was listening with their ears. And I said, wow, that's like 5 years of postgraduate training. Maybe I should use you as my consultant. I say that in order to emphasize, uh, video, what you were saying, that the child has a life outside of the caretaking environment, school or aftercare program or whatever it is, and that's where they learn to make sense of the world. And so, to the degree that we can, we want to make good sense of the family so we can make good sense to the family and consider that for most of the children in our care, we have time. We have a whole school year. And what we want to do, as Wendy was saying earlier, in terms of time management, is pace the unfolding of our relationship with the families whose children are in our care. We can't do everything at once. But my guess is most people on here have very decent sensibilities about how to form initial relationships with parents. And those who are responsible for connections with families or pedagogical things or methodology, right, classroom management things, it's worth thinking about what do we want to communicate with the families about what's happening in the school overall so that they kind of know, these are the themes that we're focusing on. These are the developmental targets that we have over the course of this month or this week so that the parents have some sense of what we're doing. So part of the why is opening up the Venn diagram so that the context makes sense for the families. We're not asking them to do anything. And one of the things about time management, or what I'm often asked to do, mental health consultation, if you get there before something needs to be fixed, you save yourself time, right? If I am always wondering for myself, what keeps a child regulated, meaning emotionally balanced, and organized, meaning they're making sense of the world? How do they navigate? What gets them dysregulated and disorganized? What gets them re-regulated and reorganized? Because I want to feed the parts that help the child process the world. And I see whether that's making sense to the degree that they remain regulated and organized. I want to know those things. I want to feed those things because when I do, I enhance the likelihood that the child remains regulated and organized throughout most of the school day, and that I'm building resilience so that if something throws them off a little bit, they get back in balance. One way to consider the task of preschool, if you are able to factor out all the external things that other people want you to measure for the sake of contract management to see if you're succeeding, everybody here knows, I think, that you know that you're succeeding if the child makes sense of the day throughout the course of the day. That's a child who's in preschool to learn how to make sense and navigate an environment that's not their home. And if they do that, they'll do better in kindergarten, first, second, third grade, and high school. They're navigating a pedagogical environment, they're navigating a physical environment, they're navigating a social environment. And if you consider cultures that aren't our culture, whatever that happens to be, that is what children learn in the first 5 or 8 years of their lives, is just how to make sense of the world around them and the people in it and the things in it. That's the why. Again, if you can fold in the things that you're required to teach so you can measure what they've learned, you'll teach them better and you'll measure them better if you realize that it's all essentially relational and it's all geared toward helping them find their own way of making better sense of the world. I want to tell a quick story uh, about one of the children I worked with in one of the Bronx Head Starts where I consulted, where the kind of issue that people often bring to a mental health consultant has to do with something that everybody calls behavior because they don't know what to say. And so, could you please see Maria? Why? Because she has behaviors. Hmm, that's that's clinically very useful for me. But I realize that's what everybody says. And I kind of in the back of my head of saying, well, we have behaviors now. We're talking with each other. That's a behavior. So I try to narrow it down. What's where does she do best and what seems most challenging? And I get a little bit of sense of that. And part of the complaint has to do with always and never. She's always doing what she wants to do, and she's never doing what we tell her to do. And when we tell her to do what she doesn't want to do, then she gets upset. Well, okay. Wouldn't that be the same for most of us? But how does that relate to a 3-year-old? Turns out that free play at a table is something she enjoys. And she enjoys what broadly is called manipulatives. I think everybody knows what like if she's sitting at a table by herself playing with a thing with it she's touching and doing things with it, she's pretty stable. Say, okay, let me understand when she's the most stable, what is it that's working for her that keeps her stable? My approach, once I've gotten the teacher's permission to kind of engage a child, is to kind of move closer slowly and see what they're doing from a distance, move closer gradually, and then say, can I watch? And I'll either get a yes or a who cares, which I take as an invitation. So I sit there and she's got one of those houses that has maybe 7 or 8 doors and 7 or 8 keys. And inside each room, when you open the door, is a person or an animal or a thing. The people who made the toy and the teachers think that the point of the toy is to put the key in the door, unlock it, open it, take the thing, close the door, lock the door. Right? The same way if you have, those toys where you get to button and zipper things. So, they're made to target your fine motor skills and your visual motor integration. And naturally, when a child looks at it, the first thing on their mind is, oh, great, here's an opportunity for me to improve my visual motor integration and my fine motor skills so I can remain regulated and organized and become a surgeon. Maybe. They don't see what we think they see. Okay, let me do a 1 minute exercise. Please take anything that's in front of you, just something in your hands, and look at it for 30 seconds and do anything you want with it, but don't think thoughts, right? Don't just like play around with it and see what happens for you. So, for instance, Naya and I are zoned in with each other, so we both took pens. And what I'm noticing about both of us is that neither of us wrote anything, right? And both of us, we're early childhood people, so we're into sensory stuff, but both of us were very interested in the physical qualities of the pen and the feeling in our fingers and its weight and its texture and its balance and all those kinds of things. Those are things that are inherently fascinating for any child. And therefore, when we present a child with a developmental toy, it's important for us to see how they're engaging that thing, because that tells us what's going on developmentally. And if you get a child who takes the keys and opens the doors, that tells you something about what they've been exposed to in the past and what their developmental capacities are. Because it takes a certain unfolding to have the fine motor skills to and the visual skills to recognize that a key goes in a small hole and you turn it and the doors open. That's very sophisticated in a way, developmentally, right? A lot of things have to happen before that. And what this child was doing all on her own for 5 or 8 minutes was doing everything but that. She was picking it up. She was touching things. She was turning it around. She was feeling it. She was really entranced with this because of what it was offering her. And I had the brilliant idea that maybe I could show her how a key works. So I tried that, and within about 15 seconds, she lost interest in that activity and wanted to do something else. Okay, what do we learn from this about Maria's development? Well, what I learned from it is that she has pretty good persistence of effort, right? Persistence of effort is a very important pre-verbal skill. And she has very strong tactile interest, and she has very strong visual interest, and something's going on with her imagination, and something's going on with the cognitive skills, and it's about her fingers, her eyes, and the object, and its potential and color. And that's where she is developmentally. Okay? Even though she was 3, typically that kind of developmental interest happens robustly at a much younger age and becomes elaborated to this. So I don't know why that was more prominent for her, but I told the story to the teacher and I wondered, you know, when she becomes complicated for you, is she doing something that's satisfying for her and then you want her to do it differently or something else? And it's like, yeah, that's what happens. So it's like, okay, you know, you have a flow of activities during the day. It might be worth thinking, since this is what keeps her regulated and organized, what flow works for her that doesn't disturb the flow of your day, but is a little bit flexible. That actually helped her in the classroom because teachers teachers think like teachers. So, if you point something out, I trust my staff. Then I met her mother and I said, let me tell you a story about class and you tell me if we're describing the same child. Uh, I told her the story, kind of emphasizing what I found fascinating and brilliant about her, which was her profound interest in this funny object. And then I said, what happened when I tried to shape the interest to my interest and what it did to her? And I said, am I talking about somebody you know? She said, yeah, all the time. I said, okay. So why don't we think a little bit about what zone she's in? The way I often describe it to parents is her body is 3 and her nervous system is maybe 9 to 18 months. And so, you know, when I say that, because the question was about developmental delays, if I talk about what's going on chronologically and what's happening in the nervous system, nervous system seems to be something parents make sense of without having to describe it much more. Because it's like if I say she kind of has the nervous system of a 9-month-old sometimes, and therefore I want to do things that make sense to the nervous system of a 9-month-old, and therefore this classroom environment isn't geared to somebody with a 9-month-old nervous system, and maybe we can do something that will get her some extra support to help her nervous system engage more robustly with the world around her. I wasn't speaking to her like I'm speaking to you, right? Uh, that might help her, and that's why we have special education. Okay. The mother was very receptive. She wanted her child to thrive. So I'm kind of talking specifically in these instances about parents who are very invested in their child's well-being and can have this kind of conversation well. And what I'm finding is that, as Tiffany said, if I speak as if I'm listening with their ears, that covers a lot of territory with a lot of parents because what Wendy was saying earlier and Vidya is we want to get some sense of what's meaningful in the parent's life with the child. And I want to create a zone of joint attention, of mutual interest in how to help that be robust at home and in school. My hope in saying these things is that you're doing what Naya's doing, which is nodding your head, which to me is an affirmation like, I already knew that. And I know you already know it. Many of the things we already know are out here on the side because there's something that we're told is more important. And often it's the things that are kind of at the edge where when we have time to talk with our colleagues or reflect privately or talk with parents, the things on the edge come into the middle. And then we can make richer sense of them because now we're looking at them, right? That's Gestalt perceptual theory has to do with figure and ground, right? The figure is the thing that's in the center. The ground is everything else. And our world perceptually moves constantly from figure to ground to figure to ground. There's a smooth flow, right? If you're cooking dinner, consider the flow of things that you're paying attention to, right? Things, once you've taken care of it, it's off on the side and you're doing the next thing. Part of what goes on developmentally is children learn how to manage the flow between figure and ground and figure and ground. And what we want to do is help them sustain attention on what we're calling figure, but we have to see what they're calling figure, because when they're robustly engaged with it, it expands by itself. That's how we're wired, right? It moves into other kinds of things, and all of our systems are integrated. So again, when we're talking with parents, we want to find the thing that's of mutual interest and live there recognizing that we're starting something flowing. And what I'm doing here, I guess, is what I try to do clinically, which is I'm sharing my sensibilities with your sensibilities. I didn't have much time for interaction because of the setup here, but thanks to Vidya and Wendy, we had a little bit of conversation about how I hear somebody's concerns and sensibilities and how I respond. There's a way in which, like your tongue, your heart tells my tongue what to say. Right? If you think about that with children and parents, you'll find that most of what you want, let me rephrase that. All that you have in the moment is all that you have in that moment. You're not going to take advantage of something you haven't learned yet. Right? So if you want to take the most advantage of what you already have, let things flow to the middle, guided by the quality of conversation you want to have. And you'll teach each other about each other, and you'll teach each other about teaching, parenting, and child development. And so my hope is that in nodding your head, I already knew that. That's what I want. I want for each of us here to recognize what's already in our hands. And what's already in our hands is the capacity to be what in developmental theory they call the more knowledgeable other. That's a nod to somebody called Vygotsky. That's kind of all I know about him. I know that and zone of proximal development. And if you say those two things, people will think you're a scholar. I'm not. But if you keep your mind there, that's where growth happens anyway. And part of teaching and part of consulting with parents is participating in growth together. And everybody here who works in this field is really good at that. And I just want to encourage you to rest at what you're best at and to let everything else organize itself around it, because to the degree that your environment lets it, that's your strongest suit. So we have about 7 minutes left for thoughts, comments, discussions. If you can somehow let Naya know that you're inclined to talk, or Kayla, you'll be given the floor.
Thank you so much, Ken. This was great. Yeah, if anybody, if you have anything you want to add, any questions you have, oh, we have somebody who raised their hand.
Hi. I'm sorry. I actually hit that accidentally, but I think it must be on purpose.
Let's
Um,
go with the karma. Okay.
yes, that's a as you're talking, I often think before how it relates when I'm speaking with families, or colleagues, or any situation. Um, the idea of getting out of my own headspace to share space together,
Mm,
with the family or the staff member that I have to have maybe a difficult or challenging for me conversation. Um,
mm,
being able to put down a lot of my own in order to create a space where
mm,
we can talk together communally. And so as you're speaking, when you talk about kind of bringing that back into perspective, that really did kind of pop up for me. And I'm a professional development person at a child care council in New York. And I often have started bringing that up as I hear people talk about preparing or being anxious about
mm.
conversations with families.
So, Angela, one of the chat comments thanked you for your wisdom, which means that Naya will get in touch with you to present some other time. But I'm wondering, can you give like a 1 or 2 minute vignette of a time where that worked really well for you despite your hesitation?
I think um, especially in relation to parents that I've I've felt uncomfortable thinking that
Mm,
they were going to get angry with me,
mm,
or that they were going to, that it was going to be ill received, that they might, at the time when I was a teacher, it used to be like, what are they going to do? Are they going to talk to other parents? Or is this going to be a
mm,
big thing? And I really and I really tried to, um, in that situation, I'm thinking of a specific family. Um,
mm,
I did hear like, what as a parent is the connection, you
mm,
know, and that connection of I see and I want what's best for your child.
mm,
And I know that we both want that, and can be helpful. Like this can be helpful, and it can be honest and kind, because that's kind. So what can we do together? And I just really tried to put down, like, I'm not going to get in my head and think about what I'm going to say back when they say this, or
mm.
that they tell me I'm not a good teacher, all of the things that probably are internal when you think that when you're struggling and you think I'm letting a child down, or I don't know enough, or I can't get through. That's a very common thing. I don't know, I'm trying all the tricks in my bag and I can't get through. And so it's my failure. And then you go into a meeting thinking they're going to be as critical about you as you are about yourself.
Hmm.
And so I think putting those
Hmm.
things aside and really, I really worked on that. Like, I'm not going to think of what the outcome is because, to your point, it's going to be created when we're together, not just in my head.
Yes, I think that's so well voiced. Uh, that the things that are in the back, letting the things in the background be in the background and letting the foreground be, okay, we have a connection. How do we enrich that?
Yes.
And how do I honor that? And how do I let the connection guide me into the next moment?
Mm.
Children live in the world of now, next, and later. And anxiety means we skip next and we jump right to later. So all the speculations you're saying about how you're about to be hated, uh, you left out next, and
Yes.
then later becomes next, and then we're frozen,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
One thing that happens well in preschool, right, is uh, moving from now to next to now to next to now to next. It takes advantage of how children do that so that the later is actually based on something sensible and not anxious or imagined.
Yes.
You know, we're going to play, and then I'm going to ring a bell, and then we're going to have the most fun anybody on earth ever had cleaning up, and then we're going to have pizza and ice cream, which would be a great, yeah, something like that, right? But it's the now, next, now, next, now, next that if you live in that beat in your relation with parents, you'll find that you're giving each other cues about what's most centrally important to each of you. And one of the marks of being a good professional, much less a good human being, is suspending your concerns so that the relationship guides these things well.
Yes.
And,
That's beautiful.
uh, emergent development isn't just about children. Emergent development is also about relationships. So I really, really appreciate the accident you made when you hit the unmute button. That's just great.
Thank you.
So we have 2 minutes left. Naya, what do we do?
Well, we have one other person who wants to talk to you, so we'll let them have
Please,
the
let's do that.
Hi, Mr. Kessel. John Rice is my name. I'm a social worker as well. And
Oh,
actually just finished,
welcome, social worker.
thank you. I just finished doing some presentations for the Early Care Learning Council Infant and Toddler Network on restorative
Oh,
practices,
great.
which
Hmm.
was my joy. And it's very, very compatible with everything you're saying, relationship,
Hmm.
connection. And I was applying it to my son. Um, I wouldn't be too specific, but just got a letter from his school that he's not going to get credit for a course. Um, and it goes back to preschool as well, that
Hmm.
where I think a lot of things weren't connecting for him. He would come off the playground and have a tantrum, for example. And I always
Hmm.
looked at that as a shame response because we were interrupting his play. And
Hmm.
I just really appreciate your wisdom, and I'm going to apply it when I have a conversation with him and try to do that, more about what makes sense,
Hmm.
and bring that into the conversation with his guidance counselor as he plans
Thank
for
you.
his senior year. So, really want to thank you. It's brilliant, and I love your
Thanks.
way of
Well, let me
sharing.
take the opportunity to, first of all, I'm really uh, grateful to you. I can tell by how you talk that you have a good influence over the people you do training with. So thank you for
Oh,
that.
thank you.
Uh, and I wanted to paint a picture that may help us understand what might generate a child's reluctance to follow our wise guidance. Um, let's say we're sitting around the living room a bunch of us. And uh, one of the people in the living room is a little younger than the other people in the living room. So we say to the young person, go get Auntie Maggie some orange juice from the refrigerator. This is a
Mhm.
family where a child knows how to go to the refrigerator and pour a glass of orange juice. So they go to the room and they stand in the doorway and they don't do anything. And after 2 minutes, you wonder, where's the orange juice? So you go to the child and you stand behind them and you said, I told you to get the orange juice. And they can't say anything. And so you get closer and they take a step backwards. So you put your hand on their shoulder and you push them forward and they push harder backwards. Uh,
Mhm.
Maybe there's something you're not seeing. So in this particular instance, uh, perhaps Johnny has a fear of snakes, and perhaps the kitchen is filled with snakes. Now, this is a silly picture, but I'm just making, right? There's something aversive that's preventing him from doing something that he would do under other circumstances, and he wants to back away from what's aversive. And the people who want him to proceed well don't see that he's encountering something that's aversive. And if they're not seeing through his eyes, or they're not taking in the context and he can't communicate with it, they're going to do things that enhances the aversion. And, those among us who aren't snake friendly uh, might also push back under those circumstances. So just consider, please, when your child or some child you're working with is having a difficulty in a school setting or a caretaker setting, it may be worth trying to see what it is for them to be in that setting and what's generating it, particularly if they're otherwise fairly fluid. Maybe there's something worth noting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. Thanks.
Okay. Naya, thank you. Should anybody have a wish to speak with me to kick some things around, or perhaps they want a consultation, Naya knows how to get in touch.
Yes, would you like to leave that information with our attendees today?
I'm sorry, to do what?
Would you let them know how to contact you?
Oh, let me put my email in the here.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. Ken, this was great. This was really great.
Well, thank you. I hope at some point we actually get to meet in person.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks, Naya.